I was holding our 3-month-old daughter when I heard my wife say it. She was on the phone in the kitchen speaking in Japanese to someone I assumed was her mother. I don't speak Japanese fluently, but I've picked up enough over the years to understand basic conversations. Enough to understand what she said that Thursday afternoon while I stood in the hallway, frozen. Akachan wa kare no ko janai. The baby isn't his. She laughed after she said it. Not nervously, not guiltily, just casually. Like she was commenting on the weather. I looked down at Emma's face. She had my wife's dark eyes, but everyone said she had my nose. My mother had cried when she first held her, saying she looked exactly like I did as a baby. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there in the hallway with our daughter sleeping against my chest while my wife continued talking, her voice light and unbothered. When she finally came out of the kitchen, she smiled at me. Was she fussy? No, I managed. She's been good. Good. I'm going to shower before dinner. She kissed Emma's forehead, then mine, and walked past me like nothing had happened. That night I lay awake while Yuki slept beside me. I told myself I must have misheard. My Japanese wasn't perfect. Maybe she'd said something else. Maybe I'd taken it out of context. But I knew what I'd heard. And I knew I needed to be absolutely certain before I did anything. She was presenting a paper on neonatal care protocols, and I was immediately struck by how precisely she articulated complex ideas. We talked for 3 hours after her presentation, and I remember thinking I'd never met anyone who made me feel so immediately understood. She moved from Osaka to Boston for me. She left her family, her friends, her entire life. I watched her struggle through that first winter, saw her cry when she missed her mother, held her when the isolation became too much. I promised her we'd build a life here that would be worth the sacrifice. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony that blended both our traditions. Her family flew over, though her father barely spoke to me. Her mother was warmer, but I always sensed a distance, a reservation. Yuki told me it was normal, that traditional Japanese parents take time to accept foreign sons-in-law. I accepted that. I respected it. I learned basic Japanese phrases, learned to bow properly, learned which topics to avoid at family dinners. For 6 years, we built what I thought was a strong marriage. We bought a house in Cambridge. We talked about starting a family. When Yuki got pregnant, I cried. She held my face and told me I was going to be an amazing father. I believed her. I believed everything. Looking back now, I can see the small signs I missed. The way she'd switch to Japanese when she wanted privacy on phone calls, even when I was in the room. How she'd visit her family in Japan alone, sometimes for weeks, saying it was easier without me there. The slight hesitation when I'd suggest meeting her co-workers or the other Japanese nurses at her hospital. I told myself it was cultural, that I needed to give her space to maintain her connections to home, that not everything in a marriage needs to be shared. I told myself these things because I loved her, because I trusted her, because I never imagined she could look me in the eye while holding our daughter and lie so completely. The next morning I called my doctor's office. I told them I wanted a paternity test. The nurse asked if I wanted to discuss it with a counselor first, given the implications. I said no. She scheduled me for that afternoon. I took a half-day from the lab, telling my supervisor I had a personal appointment. I'd been working on a clinical trial for a new cardiac medication for 18 months, and we were approaching critical data analysis. My team was counting on me. But none of that mattered now. At the clinic, a phlebotomist drew my blood efficiently. "Results take about a week," she said. "We'll call you directly." "Can you do it faster?" I asked. "We can expedite for an additional fee, 72 hours. "Do it." I went home and acted normal. I held Emma. I made dinner. When Yuki talked about her day at the hospital, I listened and responded appropriately. I asked about the premature twins in the NICU she'd been worried about. I laughed at her story about a resident who'd mixed up patient charts. Inside, I was numb. That night, I waited until Yuki was asleep, then carefully collected one of Emma's used bottles from the kitchen. I sealed it in a plastic bag and stored it in my briefcase. The next morning, I dropped it off at the clinic before work. For the comparison, I told the same phlebotomist, She nodded without judgment. We'll call you Monday. They spoke in Japanese for almost an hour while I played with Emma in the living room. I caught fragments of the conversation, words about Emma's sleep schedule, about teething, about a doctor's appointment coming up. At one point, Yuki laughed and said something that made my blood run cold. Kare wa nani mo shiranai. He doesn't know anything. She said it lightly, affectionately almost, like she was talking about a child who hadn't figured out where the cookies were hidden. I kept my face neutral. I kept playing with Emma's blocks. I kept breathing. When Yuki got off the phone, she came over and sat beside me on the floor. My mother wants us to visit this summer. She hasn't seen Emma in person yet. That would be nice, I said. You'd come too, right? I know last time was difficult with my father, but of course I'll come, she's my daughter. Yuki smiled and kissed my cheek. You're a good man. That night, I slept in my office at home, telling Yuki I had early data to review. I sat in the dark and tried to understand how we'd gotten here, tried to trace back through our marriage to find the moment when everything had become a lie. I couldn't find it. Every memory felt contaminated now. Every smile, every touch, every whispered "I love you" was suddenly suspect. Would you like to schedule a counseling appointment to discuss? I hung up. I stood in that hallway for 10 minutes. Colleagues walked past. Someone asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I wasn't fine. I went back to my desk and pulled up my email. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I searched for the name of the attorney who'd handled our house purchase 3 years ago. Found his contact information. Sent him a message requesting a consultation for a family law matter. He responded within an hour. Could I come in tomorrow morning? Yes, I could. I left work early, telling my supervisor I was feeling ill. That wasn't a lie. I felt like I was going to vomit the entire drive home. When I walked into the house, Yuki was in the kitchen making dinner. Emma was in her bouncer, babbling happily. The scene was so painfully normal that for a moment I wanted to pretend I'd never overheard that phone call, never taken that test. But I had. And now I knew. You're home early, Yuki said, looking up from chopping vegetables. Everything okay? Just tired, I said. I think I'm coming down with something. She frowned with concern. Go rest. I'll bring you soup when it's ready. I went to our bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photos on Yuki's nightstand. Our wedding, our honeymoon in Kyoto, a maternity photo from when she was 8 months pregnant, her hand on her belly, my hand over hers. I picked up that last photo and studied it. Tried to see if there was any hint in her expression, any shadow of guilt or deception. There was nothing. She looked radiant, happy, in love. I set the frame back down carefully. The attorney's name was Robert Chen. He was in his 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that I appreciated. His office was in downtown Boston, all dark wood and legal texts. Tell me what's happening, he said after we'd settled into chairs across from each other. I told him everything. The overheard phone conversation, the paternity test, the results. He listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. First, I'm sorry, this is devastating, and you have every right to be angry. He paused. Second, we need to talk about what your options are, legally and practically. I want to know who the father is, I said. I want to know how long this has been going on. I want to know everything. I understand. But confronting your wife right now, in anger, isn't strategic. We need to think carefully about how we approach this. I'm not angry, I said, and I realized it was true. I wasn't angry. I was something much colder. I'm past angry. Robert studied me. What do you want the outcome to be? I want the truth, all of it. And then I want to make sure she can't destroy me financially or legally when this comes out. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Robert had advised me to protect my assets before filing for divorce, as Massachusetts was an equitable distribution state. I made copies of all our financial records, bank statements, investment accounts, mortgage papers, title to the house. I created a secure folder on a cloud drive that only I could access. I went through Yuki's things while she was at work. Her laptop was password protected, but I knew she used the same password for most things. Emma's birth date. I was right. I copied her browser history, her emails, her messages. What I found made me sick. There were emails dating back almost 2 years to someone named Kenji, a nurse at her hospital. The messages started professional, then friendly, then intimate. By a year ago, they were explicit. I read about their lunches together, their late nights after shifts. A weekend trip to New York she'd told me was a nursing conference. I read messages about how I was kind but boring, how she felt trapped in a foreign country with someone who would never truly understand her, how Kenji made her feel alive again. I found messages from when she discovered she was pregnant. She'd told Kenji first. They'd discussed what to do. He'd wanted her to leave me. She'd refused, saying it wasn't practical, that I was stable and reliable and would be a good father. He'll never suspect, she'd written. And this way, the baby has security. There was more. So much more. But I couldn't read anymore. I copied everything to my secure drive and closed the laptop. That night, Yuki asked me if something was wrong. I'd been quiet at dinner. Just stressed about work, I said. We're behind on the trial timeline. She massaged my shoulders. You work too hard. You need to take care of yourself. I almost laughed. What about Emma? I asked. She's not mine biologically, but I'm on the birth certificate. What are my rights? That's complicated. You've been acting as her father since birth. You've bonded with her. You're providing for her. A court might rule that you have established paternity through your actions regardless of biology. So I might have to pay child support for another man's baby? Possibly, but given the circumstances, the deception, the evidence of your wife's intent to deceive you, a judge might be sympathetic. We can make a strong case that you were defrauded. I nodded slowly. And if I want custody? Or visitation? Robert looked at me carefully. Do you? She's not biologically yours. I thought about Emma's face. The way she smiled when I came home. How she'd started reaching for me when she wanted to be held. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what I want anymore. You don't have to decide that now, but you should think about it. Because once we file, everything moves quickly. She was expensive, but Robert vouched for her work. I want to know about Kenji, I told her. Everything. Where he lives, what his situation is, whether there are others. And I want to know if my wife is still seeing him. Carol nodded. Do you want surveillance? Yes. This gets costly. I don't care. She called me 4 days later. Can you meet today? We met at a coffee shop in Brookline. She handed me a folder. Kenji Tanaka, 32, nurse practitioner in the same NICU where your wife works. Single, lives in Somerville. No criminal record. No debt issues. She paused. They're still seeing each other. Regularly. Usually lunch twice a week. And they've met at his apartment 3 times in the last week. Once overnight when you were supposedly at a conference. I hadn't been at a conference. I'd been home. Which meant, she told me she was covering an overnight shift, I said. Carol's expression was sympathetic but professional. There's more. She's been taking Emma to see him. Everything stopped. What? Twice last week, both times in the afternoon. She brought the baby to his apartment, stayed for about 2 hours each time. I stared at the photos Carol pushed across the table. Yuki walking into Kenji's building holding Emma's carrier. Yuki sitting in a park with Kenji. Him holding Emma. Yuki laughing at something he said while Emma slept in a stroller between them. I'm sorry, Carol said quietly. I closed the folder. What do I owe you? She told me. I wrote a check. What are you going to do? She asked as I stood to leave. I don't know yet, I said, but I'll let you know if I need anything else. It was Sunday morning, and Yuki set up her laptop in the living room so they could see Emma. I watched from the doorway as she held Emma up to the camera, speaking Japanese rapidly. Her mother cooed and made faces. Her father was more reserved but smiled when Emma babbled. Then Yuki said something that made her mother laugh and her father's smile disappear. I caught 2 words clearly. Honto no Otosan. Real father. Her father said something sharp. Yuki's face fell. Her mother tried to smooth things over, but her father kept talking, his tone harsh. Finally, Yuki snapped something back and ended the call. She sat there for a moment, holding Emma, her shoulders tight. "Everything okay?" I asked from the doorway. She startled. "How long have you been standing there?" "Just walked in." Sounded tense. "My father is being difficult. He wants us to visit sooner than summer. I told him that doesn't work with your schedule." She looked at me. "That's true, right? You can't get away before June?" "Probably not," I lied. "I had 3 weeks of unused vacation time." She nodded. "That's what I told him." I wondered if her father knew, if her mother knew, if I was the only fool in this entire situation who'd been kept in the dark. Financial documentation, evidence of the affair, proof of deception, Carol's surveillance photos, the paternity test results. I met with Robert one final time before filing. "Once we submit this, there's no going back," he said. "Are you certain?" "Yes." "Have you thought about custody? The court will ask what you want regarding Emma." I had thought about it. I'd thought about nothing else for weeks. "I want visitation," I said. "I know she's not mine biologically. I know I have no obligation. But I've been her father for 4 months. I've been getting up with her at night. I've been changing her, feeding her, loving her. I can't just walk away." Robert nodded slowly. "That's good. That shows character. The judge will respect that. But I don't want full custody. I want Yuki to have primary custody, and I want her to have full financial responsibility. I'll pay nothing for this child. We can argue for that given the circumstances, but you should know. I know the law might not agree. I know I might end up paying anyway, but I want my position clear. I was deceived. I want that on record. We'll make sure it is." I'd moved my things into a furnished apartment in Somerville 3 days earlier. Robert had advised me to establish separate residence before serving papers, but I did something I'm not proud of. I watched from my car across the street as she pulled into our driveway. I watched her get Emma out of the car seat. I watched her juggle the baby and her bag and a folder of papers as she unlocked the front door. I watched the lights come on inside. Watched her moving past the windows. Then my phone rang. It was her. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. And again. 6 times in a row. Finally, she texted, "Please call me. We need to talk. Please." I turned off my phone and drove to my new apartment. The messages started desperate. "Please, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." Then angry. "You don't even have the courage to face me after 8 years?" Then manipulative. "Emma needs you. How can you abandon your daughter?" That last one almost broke me, but I remembered. She's not my daughter, not biologically. And Yuki had made sure of that while making me believe otherwise. On day 4, Robert called. "Your wife's attorney contacted me. They want to meet to discuss settlement terms." "Already?" "She knows the evidence is damaging. She wants to contain this before it gets uglier." "What are they proposing?" "Joint custody of Emma, a 50-50 split of marital assets, no spousal support either direction." "What about child support?" "They're willing to waive it if you waive visitation." I was quiet for a long moment. "So if I want to see Emma, I have to pay for a child that isn't mine, but if I walk away completely, I owe nothing." "That's the offer." "What do you recommend?" Robert sighed. "Legally, take the deal, walk away clean. You're young, you can rebuild. But," he paused, "only you know what's right for you emotionally. I need to think about it. You have time. They're motivated to settle quickly." Her attorney indicated that she wants to avoid a trial. I hung up and sat in my new apartment. Bare walls, furniture from IKEA, everything temporary and cold. I thought about Emma, about the last 4 months, about getting up at 3 a.m. for feedings, about her first smile, about the way she'd grab my finger with her tiny hand. I thought about the fact that none of that changed the biology, changed the lies, changed the betrayal. I made my decision that night, but I didn't tell Robert immediately. First, I needed to see Yuki, to hear her explain in her own words what she'd done and why. I texted her, "We can meet Thursday afternoon at the house. Emma should be with a sitter." She responded immediately, "Thank you. I'll arrange childcare. What time?" 2 o'clock. "I'll be there." Thursday morning, I was so anxious I couldn't eat breakfast. I went to the lab but couldn't focus. Finally, at noon, I told my supervisor I needed the rest of the day. I arrived at the house, our house, at 1:55 p.m. Yuki's car was already in the driveway. I used my key. She was sitting in the living room, in the chair she'd always loved, looking smaller somehow. Tired. Her eyes were red. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I sat on the couch across from her. "I'm listening." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know where to start." "Start with Kenji. When did it begin?" She flinched at his name. 2 years ago. We worked together on a difficult case, a premature baby with complications. We connected. It was just friendship at first, I swear. But it became more. Yes. Her voice was barely audible. I was lonely. You were working so much on your trial. I felt isolated. He understood me in ways that felt easier. Because he's Japanese. Yes. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I know that's not an excuse. I know I made vows. I know I hurt you. But I felt so lost here sometimes, and he made me feel like I was home again. And Emma? She closed her eyes. I found out I was pregnant and I didn't know who the father was. Kenji and I had been careless once, maybe twice. I was terrified. I thought about telling you, but you decided it was easier to lie. I decided I didn't want to lose everything. I love you. I know you won't believe that now, but I do. You've been so good to me, so patient with my family, so understanding about everything. I couldn't bear to hurt you. So you let me believe Emma was mine instead. For 4 months. I convinced myself that even if she wasn't biologically yours, you'd still love her. That it wouldn't matter because you'd be her father in every way that counted. I laughed bitterly. Except you took that choice away from me. You made me fall in love with a baby under false pretenses. I'm sorry. She was sobbing now. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. When I heard you on the phone, I said quietly, saying the baby isn't his, you were laughing. Like it was a joke. She went pale. You understand Japanese? Enough. I've understood enough for 3 years now. I just never said anything because I thought you deserved privacy in your own language. I leaned forward. I heard you tell your mother that I don't know anything. I heard you call Kenji the real father last weekend. I've seen the emails, Yuki, all of them. She buried her face in her hands. I've seen the photos of you taking Emma to visit him, photos of him holding her, of you 3 together looking like a family. Please, she whispered. Please, we can work through this. Couples recover from affairs. We can go to counseling. I'll cut all contact with Kenji. Please. And Emma? She looked up, confused. What about her? Will you tell her someday that I'm not her biological father? Will Kenji be in her life? What exactly are you proposing? I don't know. We can figure it out together. No, I said calmly. We can't. Because I can't trust a single word you say. Because every time I look at Emma now, I see your betrayal. Because you didn't just cheat on me. You let me bond with a child that isn't mine while planning a future with someone else. That's not true. I wasn't planning a future with Kenji. The emails say otherwise. You told him you were thinking about leaving me, that you just needed to figure out the finances first. She had no answer for that. I stood up. I'm taking the settlement offer. Full custody to you. 50-50 split of assets. No child support, no visitation. You're giving up Emma? Her voice broke. Just like that? You gave her to me under false pretenses. Now I'm returning her, to her real family. You've been her father for 4 months. She knows you. She's 4 months old. She won't remember me. I walked toward the door, then stopped. I'll be out completely by the end of the month. After that, don't contact me except through attorneys. Please don't do this. Please. I looked back at her one last time. She looked destroyed, sitting in that chair in the house we'd bought together, in the life we'd built together. But I felt nothing. Goodbye, Yuki. 8 months from filing to completion, which Robert said was relatively quick. I signed over my half of the house in exchange for keeping my retirement accounts and investments. Yuki agreed to refinance the mortgage in her name only. Neither of us paid spousal support. There was no mention of Emma in the final decree beyond confirming I waived all parental rights and responsibilities. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Yuki and Kenji moved in together that fall. That Emma calls him Papa. That they're talking about marriage. I hope he's a good father to her. I genuinely do. My parents were devastated. They'd fallen in love with Emma, and losing her felt like losing a grandchild. My mother cried for weeks. My father just looked at me with this quiet disappointment that hurt more than anger would have. She's just a baby, he said once. She didn't do anything wrong. I know, Dad. Then how can you walk away? I didn't have a good answer. Still don't. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into the clinical trial, working 16-hour days. We finished the data analysis in December. The results were promising, better than we'd hoped. We submitted our findings to the FDA for approval consideration. My supervisor recommended me for a promotion. You've been invaluable this year, she said. We couldn't have done this without you. I thanked her and went back to my desk. It's easier than explaining the truth. Sometimes I see Asian families in the park, father, mother, baby, and my chest tightens. I wonder if one of them is Yuki and Kenji and Emma. I wonder if Emma is happy, if she's healthy, if she ever asks about the man who was her father for those first 4 months. Mostly I try not to think about it. People ask if I'm angry. If I hate Yuki, I don't. Hate requires caring, and I've carefully excised that part of myself. What she did to me was calculated and cruel. But my revenge, if you can call it that, wasn't grand or dramatic. I just walked away. I let her keep the life she'd built with someone else. I let her keep the baby she'd chosen to have with him. I let her have exactly what she wanted, but without me as a safety net, and I took back my future. My attorney called last week with an interesting piece of news. Yuki and Kenji are having legal troubles. Apparently he was still legally married when their affair started, separated but not divorced. His ex-wife found out about Emma and is using the affair as leverage in their divorce proceedings. It's gotten messy. Robert asked if I wanted to file an alienation of affection claim, since we could potentially prove financial harm from Yuki's deception. I told him no. I'm done. Whatever consequences she faces now have nothing to do with me. I've rebuilt my life without her, without Emma, without any of it. Some nights I still dream about that moment in the hallway, about holding Emma while Yuki laughed on the phone in Japanese, completely unaware I was listening. In the dreams, I react differently. Sometimes I confront her immediately. Sometimes I grab the baby and leave right then. But I always wake up alone in my apartment, and I remember that what I actually did was much quieter. I gathered evidence, I protected myself legally and financially. I confirmed the truth, and then I removed myself from a situation where I was being used. No screaming, no confrontations, no begging for answers or closure, just silence, and a signature on divorce papers. What did you tell her? That you're fine, that you're focused on your work. That's accurate. There was a long pause. She looked sad, honey, and tired. Mom, I know. I'm not saying you should forgive her. But that baby, Emma, she's gotten so big. She's beautiful. I'm glad she's doing well. Another pause. Do you ever regret it? Walking away? I thought about the question. Really thought about it. No, I said finally. I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it. I regret the 8 years I spent building a life with someone who could lie to my face every single day. But I don't regret leaving. That was the first honest decision made in that marriage in over 2 years. Okay, Mom said softly. I just wanted to check. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and thought about Emma. About the baby who might have been my daughter if things had been different. If Yuki had been honest. If Kenji hadn't existed. If I'd been enough. But none of that matters now. What matters is that I survived. I didn't let the betrayal destroy me. I protected myself and moved forward. Some people might say I was cold, that I should have fought for Emma, biology be damned. That love is more than genetics. Maybe they're right, but they weren't the ones who stood in that hallway and heard their wife casually dismiss their entire relationship in a language she thought they didn't understand. They weren't the ones who looked at a paternity test that confirmed their worst fear. They weren't the ones who had to decide whether to pay for another man's child while watching that man play house with their ex-wife. I made my choice. I walked away with my dignity intact, my finances protected, and my future unencumbered by a child who was never really mine. And if that makes me cold, I can live with that. Proud. Accomplished. Instead, I feel empty. I realized something recently. Yuki took more from me than a marriage and a child. She took my ability to trust completely, to love without suspicion, to believe that people mean what they say. I don't know if I'll ever get that back. But I do know this. I'm not the victim anymore. I'm not the man standing in the hallway, shocked and betrayed, holding a baby that isn't his. I'm the man who faced the truth, however painful, and made the hard choice to walk away from a beautiful lie. I'm the man who chose himself. And some days, when I wake up in my quiet apartment with my coffee and my research and my future spread out before me, empty but honest, I think that might be enough.